Howdy all, grab yourselves a beer, it's time to talk Path of Exile. I'm putting this video together to explain to people that are completely new to the game, or that have some reservations after being burnt on other, pay to win / pay to cheat games, to address any concerns you might have about how Path of Exile makes its money and whether it's a pay to cheat game. And I'll answer the question that's posed by the title of the video in the introduction with a single word: no. Path of Exile is not pay to cheat, but I want to go into that in some detail, give you a bit of a sense of what the game's business model is like, and how it works, how it makes its money, and how it differs from a lot of the pay to cheat shovelware out there. So, throughout this video, I'm not going to use the term pay to win. It's a misleading term. Even the worst paid cheating shitfests that I've ever seen, games like Arcade, the version that was brought out in the West, they have victory conditions of some sort that are not cash shop driven, and all that the cash shop allows you to do, it doesn't allow you to beat the game, it allows you to cheat. In a lot of ways, it's like the old days of buying gaming magazines that had tips in them, and yes, we did do that in the 1990s, or buying back in the 1990s again, gaming console cheat adapters like the Game Genie, or calling premium numbers for advice lines, which again was a thing back in the 1990s before the internet. I want to define three levels of pay. So I'm going to use the term pay to cheat, not pay to win. But there's three levels of paid cheating that I'd want to sort of define firstly. The first type, which I'll give a single Silver Turd to, 1 out of 3, is a pay-to-cheat economy in a game that fundamentally has fair game systems. A couple of examples of this would be the World of Warcraft token, the WoW token, which is a somewhat tradable. It's not a freely tradable item because it's bind on acquire except when it's purchased from the store, but it's basically a little token that you can buy from the World of Warcraft game store, and that you can then sell it to another player for in-world currency, and that token pays their subscription for a month. So basically, you're essentially entering into a contract when you buy a WoW token from the store that you will receive game currency in lieu of, from another player. So it's been genuinely generated by fair means within the game, in exchange for you paying their subscription for a month. You don't actually know who you're buying it from, so you can't, set it up with a specific friend, but that's the way that the system works. Plex in EVE, prior to the introduction of skill injectors a couple of years ago, is another example of a pay-to-cheat economy in a game. Game balance in these games is still driven by fun, and the fundamental game systems are designed around making the game as fun as possible, but the game experience can feel complete without the paid cheating. As an example, in Path of Exile, this would be like being able to purchase items from other players in exchange for you buying them a supporter pack or premium points from the store, or perhaps for each class having a cash shop only ascendancy that you could unlock via some alternate means, so not necessarily from the cash shop, but by a grindy, difficult, or just annoying in-game method. So games that are based around that sort of system, I'm going to award 1 Silver Turd to. Secondly, I'm going to define 2 Silver Turd game to be where pay to cheat influences the very game design. Now, I'm going to argue, people may well disagree with this, that EVE Online has become this with the introduction of skill trading, where the game designers are incentivized now to get players to desire to acquire skills faster by introducing new skills. So future skill balance is decided based upon what will make the most players purchase the skill injector items, which it's a complicated thing if you don't play EVE, but basically they are mostly a cash shop item with some element of in-game finishing off for them. Another example of a game that I would define as having pay to cheat influence game design is Dungeons and Dragons Online from the period of, I believe it was about 2010 or 2011 onwards, when the game started ramping up the true reincarnation system, which is an incredible grind that was added to the game long after it was first produced, that basically allows you to re-level your characters over and over and over and over again, and each time that you reach high level and then reset to level 1, you're a little bit stronger the next time. Imagine this in Path of Exile for people that have a bit of familiarity with the systems. Imagine if when you hit level 95, you had the option to continue playing that same character, but your new version of that character permanently had some additional mod. So you'd reach level 95, then you'd reset them to level 1, but your new character always had a stacking plus 20 maximum energy shield if you're playing a witch, or perhaps plus 3 life gain on hit if you were playing a marauder. And all of these bonuses stack up over multiple lives with some sort of limit. That's one of the main systems in that game, and it's one of the reasons I've totally lost interest in the game. One of the other things that happens when a game starts having paid cheating influencing the game design, you start seeing game balance decisions be driven heavily by the nature of the cash shop. An example would be in Dungeons and Dragons Online, stat tomes, which were for a whole period of time one of the most prestigious raid items that was available in the game. So this was basically the loot that you grinded for. And initially, tomes were modified to have, like in the first era of the game, they had fairly low drop rates, but these dropped considerably when the game introduced raid timer bypass tokens, which were little tokens that allowed you to, well, basically when you completed a raid in that game, that same character couldn't enter it for 66 hours of real-world time, and this was done partly for balance and also partly because the game had earlier been a subscription model. Then when it went into a cash shop model, the raid timer bypasses were introduced. These would allow you to reset that 66 hours to 0. So you could just run the same raid over and over again. There were other systems in the game that capped you to 8 times per week, but you would then be able to acquire these tomes much faster than a non-cheating player. And this introduction of raid timer bypass tokens came at the same point as the game deciding to reduce the drop rate in future raids. So raids that were designed at the time of the Menace of the Underdark expansion or afterwards generally had lower drop rates on these tomes than the previous raids had had. And again, this is by design, and the game design becomes more about not designing a game that's fun on its own, but around designing a balance of frustration and fun that is designed to push players towards going to the cash store and buying various cheat codes from it in order to expedite the advancement. The core gameplay mechanics still remain fun, but there's so much frustration built into natural play that you feel obliged to use the cash store. And I'm going to award 3 Silver Turds to games where the fundamental game systems are driven by paid cheating considerations. These games are often designed to not be enjoyable at all without frequent payments that never stop. They often have real loss PvP that causes players who cheat to gain a lead that can seem unclosable until then the next tier of items come out in the cash shop and then people have to buy them all again. And the now defunct browser and Facebook game Mafia Wars is the best example I can think of this, and it was a game that soured me completely on anything to do with pay-to-cheat games. That game, if you never played it, was basically, it was shovelware, but you would have an energy meter that allowed you to perform various actions in-game that would grant you experience points. When your experience points reached a new level, your energy meter would refill and you'd get a few stats to spend. and you could attack other players, and this would basically be a comparison of your items against that other player's items. Your best 501 items versus their best 501 items. Would consider your attack stat versus their your combined attack stat versus their combined defense stat, with randomness playing a small part in deciding a close encounter. And essentially, while the punishments for losing weren't particularly bad, I think you lost 6 energy, which was not very meaningful in the game and would be recovered through, if my recollection is correct, 15 minutes of sitting around doing nothing. You would continually be attacked while you were offline. You'd come back and you'd find that you'd been robbed by various other players. The game had very small consequences for you for losing those fights, but it would be a reminder every time you logged on that while you were away, you'd been attacked. If your items had been better, and particularly if you had 501 of them, then you would have been better positioned to defend against these attacks. And you might have even gained experience points, rather than just losing stamina and losing a few experience points. I think the clearest example I can think of for this would be, imagine Path of Exile if the cash store sold crafting orbs directly, but reduced drop rates across the board so that you felt that you needed to buy crafting orbs from the store. And if it had, for instance, for players that have been noticing that have been complaining about low drop rates of maps and low drop rates of Sulfite in this league, both of which, for what it's worth, don't consider to be particularly correct. But if the store had potions that for 6 hours of gameplay gave you a double drop rate on maps, or that for 6 hours of gameplay ensured that every time Nico spawned in a map, you would get an additional 2 Sulfite deposits over what you would have otherwise received. And perhaps Nico's chance of spawning in a map, instead of being 1 in 12, might be up to 5 in 12. All of these sorts of things would be examples of what a 3 Silver Turd pay to cheat system might look like in Path of Exile. But fundamentally, I think that the game selling all loot orbs in store except for the Mirror of Kalandra would be an example. Would be the most compelling example. So I want to quickly look at Path of Exile's model itself, and you'll notice here that I'm looking at some of the at the cash shop in game, and you'll see that there's 2 fundamental things that they sell. Firstly, there's the supporter packs, which contain cosmetics and some amount of cash store points. Generally 1 point per 10 US cents, with the exception of some of the smaller packs might be $5 below that. And you'll notice some of the packs can be quite expensive, 160 US, and they go up to 480. I'll get to why that is later. But generally they'll come with a cosmetic armor set, a number of points, and various other in-game swag, or on the higher tier ones, real-world swag like t-shirts, hoodies, developer-signed artworks, things like that. And so that's the first part of the Path of Exile cash store. All of these are absolutely and utterly cosmetic only and have no gameplay impact at all. The second thing is the microtransaction store, where you spend the points that you get with the packs and purchase various, mostly cosmetics, and to a lesser extent in-game storage. So in-game storage is the one thing that does offer an advantage in play, and the advantage that it gives you is, well, once you hit a certain point, you can't keep everything in the game. And when you've been playing enough, you'll hit a point that the things you have to throw out, if you just have your core 4 free stash tabs, will start to become things that you may end up regretting selling off later. So yeah, the things that are available in the store, there's the map stash tab, which is one of the things that players regard as one of the most important to purchase, and the currency tab. And these basically allow you to store, large amounts of in-game currency, or
currency stash.
large amounts of in-game currency or in-game map items for longer times, and also to more conveniently and more easily trade them to other players. Now, Path of Exile targets four main types of spenders, I would say. There's low spenders who will mostly find themselves buying stash tabs and alternate skill effects. So alternate skill effects are, for example, one that comes to mind is the Celestial Herald skills, and they're all in this tab in the in-game cash store. So here's one, for instance, the Faith Guard Herald effect, which will change the effect of your Herald skills to just look like something different than the default skill. Now, so low spenders buy stash tabs, which are forever, and alternate skill effects, which generally, although many of them are versatile and can be used across multiple characters, they're generally designed so that you probably won't use them on every character you create. So someone might, for instance, purchase the Sawblade Blade Vortex for one character, but then the next character doesn't run Blade Vortex, so they'll feel compelled to maybe buy the Demonic Stormcall effect for their Stormcall or Vaal Stormcall build. Maybe later they'll buy a Stygian Molten Strike effect. So in a way that the stash tabs you'll keep forever, this is how Path of Exile tries to get repeat purchases from low spend players. Now, there is a potential for these sorts of skill effects to be dicey if GGG were to deliberately release, it were to deliberately shake up the meta, the balance in the game, so that one league everyone feels compelled to play Stormcall, and so they buy Divine Stormcall, and then the next league Stormcall is nerfed heavily, and for instance Toxic Rain may be the new hotness, and players may feel compelled to then buy the Night Locust Toxic Rain effect, which is one I actually haven't seen. And whilst this is a concern, it hasn't happened in the past. Grinding Gear Games have acted in good faith on this so far. They pretty frequently release microtransactions for off-meta skills, and we're not really seeing situations where they release a higher than usual price point skill effect for a skill that's bad, and then immediately go and give that skill a tremendously unwarranted buff. There doesn't seem to be any strong correlation between the skills that are strong at any given time and the skills that Grinding Gear Games produce microtransactions for, with one exception, and that's when the community sort of insists that a skill gets an MTX. And then we saw that with the Stygian Molten Strike, which was released after several leagues of Molten Strike being an excellent skill that had no microtransactions available for it. And then the Stygian Molten Strike would be quite an opposite effect to the base skill. The base skill is very flashy. The Stygian Molten Strike version is quieter and more subtle. And so, for instance, Molten Strike went several leagues as a great skill with no MTX. Elemental Hit is a great skill that I believe has no microtransactions available. Whereas a number of completely off-meta skills, such as, for instance, Summon Raging Spirit, which I don't think has been good for a couple of years, has a microtransaction for it. Ball Lightning, which has only ever really been I think it's slightly a stretch to say it's only ever been a niche skill, but it's had its moments, but it's certainly never been the centerpiece of the metagame. It has a microtransaction. For all that we talk about there being constant nerfs to Cyclone, it has, I believe, 3, and a number of other effects have been given microtransactions when they weren't being used at all. For instance, Dragon Flame Dash came out at a period of time when no one was using that skill, when the only movement skills that players considered to be viable in general were Leap Slam, Shield Charge, and Whirling Blades. In fact, that may have even predated shield charge being good. So yeah, I don't think we've got any concerns about that happening at the moment. The second category of players that Path of Exile tries to cater to with microtransaction store is what I would term medium spend players. And the things they try to market there's all of the above, so the stash tabs and the alternate skill effects, but also some of the lower tier supporter pack armor kits and portals that come with them. And these are items with absolutely no gameplay impact. So if I have a look quickly at some of the various armor sets that are available, and the cash store can actually be quite difficult to navigate at times. I'm surprised I haven't tried to do that better. You'll see just going through here, here's one of the newer releases at the time I'm recording this, is the Purple Crystal Armor Pack. And whilst this is individually expensive, from 420 MTX points, which is going to cost $42 US, for a medium spend player that falls in love with this armor set, they can buy it and have it forever and then use it on every character. So that's one thing that that's produced targeting that category of players. Has absolutely no gameplay effect at all, and that also goes along with the ones that come inside the supporter packs themselves. So, you know, for instance, this is sort of stretching it a little with the medium spend players, but the Assassin Armor Kit and Apparition that you're seeing on the screen now are an example of something that's at the higher end of what they target to that category of players. The third category that I'd consider is the high spend players. These players buy the same as the medium spenders, but might perhaps buy armor kits more often. And they're also interested in some of the real life swag, like the t-shirts, and also, unfortunately, the loot boxes. Obligatory fuck loot boxes rant. This game does have them, and they're something that's, you know, a bit of a absolute plague within the gaming industry at the moment. But again, they're purely cosmetic, so there's no paid cheating in them, and also they are only providing things that you will be able to get at a later date from the normal cash store. So for instance, you'll see there's the Fairgraves mystery box at the moment. I believe the last one was called the Oriath mystery box, and it contains a number of items that are now in the regular store. So if we have a look through here, do a quick search for the Faith Guard items, and we'll have here's the Oriath armor pack, which is the I guess was the big thing from the previous mystery box, is now available in the store. It's expensive, but it is available. So of all of the games that have loot boxes in them, Grinding Gear games do it in the least bad way. There's no exclusives, just timed exclusives. And they generally aren't sort of trying to prey as much on people as the loot box phenomenon generally does. So yeah, there's these armor kits, there's wings and other expensive cosmetics like that target the high spenders. And there's also one other thing that often gets forgotten that does have a little bit of a impact on gameplay, and that's the guild management tools. So this is guild character slots and guild tabs. Guild stash tabs are something that allows players, assuming that there's a level of trust between themselves, so i.e. within a guild, and that guild actually is functional and its members trust each other, it allows asynchronous item transfers. So for instance, I can log on at 6 AM and you know, maybe I've got an email from a guildmate overnight saying that they want to borrow my +4 Winter Orb Skin of the Loyal. So I then, again, assuming that I trust them with an item as expensive as that, and no, I don't own one of those Skins of the Loyal, I would then just put that in the guild stash tab, and then 6 hours later, when I'm not online and not able to come online, that guildie can take it out. They can then go and fight Uber Elder with it, and then they can return it to me. Or alternately, they can run off with it. But it's something that Like, these guild management tools are marketed to high spenders, and you'll notice that from the prices. I believe it costs 10. I'll have to check this, but I believe it costs 10 microtransaction points per player that you invite to your guild. But I will just make sure of that. And so yes, it's 10 microtransactions. 10 extra guild member slots costs $10 worth of points, and the premium guild tabs cost $5. Finally, the final category of Path of Exile player is the very high spenders, who GGG market bespoke services that actually impact the direction of the game in a very small way. These can sometimes be vanity items. They can sometimes be, for instance, there's a popular Bisco's leash and Bisco's collar set, which was someone's memorial to their lost dog Bisco, who'd passed away, and so they put a permanent memorial to this real-world character into the game via unique items, which I believe at the moment they're not selling the ability to create unique items, but it's something that we reserve the right to sell again in the future. In adding a Grandmaster to the Hall of Grandmasters was another one of these bespoke / vanity services that impacts the game. And yeah, divination cards are probably the most common of them now. In theory, these could have a bit of a gameplay impact if the player had some actionable intelligence on where that item would drop. So for instance, if you were to create a divination card, let's just assume that we were back in the meta where Skyforth was a very popular and powerful unique item, and if you had intel that said, let's say that you created a divination card that awarded a Skyforth, and you knew that the only way that it could drop was to drop in a monster level 77 corrupted map with temporal chains on it. Like, we're taking a really obscure set of conditions there. There's not going to be very many people running tier 10 maps that are corrupted and have temporal chains on them. And so that would be actionable intel that would give you a big advantage in the game. However, GGG get around that by providing absolutely none of that to players that create divination cards or unique items. I know that from my own divination card, the Price of Protection. I had no idea where it was going to drop. It turns out that it drops from invasion bosses, and that is simply the way that GGG set it up so that this system has integrity and so that there's no pay to cheat elements in it. So to summarize, I'm going to give the game a score out of 3 Silver Turds for how much paid cheating is in it, and I'm going to give it 0.1 out of 3. Storage space is something that does make your character stronger ultimately. It makes trade much faster, particularly the premium tabs, and the ability to avoid having to alt-tab into out-of-game tools like the third-party program acquisition, which is how you handle trades if you don't have any premium tabs. However, the default space is sufficient to play all of the content in the game and to complete it all, and there's actually someone who regularly plays solo self-found hardcore, which is the hardest mode in practice of the game, and regularly reaches level 100 on an account that is completely free. Now, Path of Exile is not a game where hitting the level cap is a feat that's accessible to casual players at all, and particularly in hardcore where your character is deleted from the league if they die, and solo self-found where you can't trade with other players anyway. Being able to do that and prioritize the items that you save and the items that you sell to vendors it demonstrates that if that can be done with just the 4 default tabs, then everything in the game can be. So yeah, for that reason, I'm going to say that the game is not pay to cheat and has less paid cheating elements than any other modern game I can think of. And that's really the reason that I play it, and the reason that I tend to buy pretty much every supporter pack that comes out, because there's just nothing else there's nothing else out there that has decent gameplay and has the integrity to avoid the the absolute minefield that is of pay to cheat crap that's modern gaming. Anyways, so once more, I'm confident to say PoE is not a pay to cheat game in any way, and that's the reason that I play it.